You needed a mother. She was never there for you.
Fucking die, you!
In 2024, Jesse Plemons won Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival. He found out by turning his phone on after a 7-hour flight home to his kids. He'd been on a night shoot in New York, wrapped at 4 in the morning, went straight to the airport, and was somewhere over the Atlantic when the award was announced. He missed the ceremony entirely. That might be the most Jesse Plemons thing that has ever happened, because here's a guy who has quietly built one of the strangest careers in modern acting. He's worked with some of the greatest directors alive, appeared in some of the most respected films of the last decade, and yet most people still only know him as the guy from Breaking Bad, and most people still call him the guy from Breaking Bad. So the real question isn't whether Jesse Plemons is good. Most serious film people already agree on that. The real question is why, despite being in some of the most important projects of the last 15 years, he keeps slipping through the conversation, and what that invisibility actually tells you about how he works. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand that the invisibility isn't a failure, it's the whole point. Jesse Plemons grew up in Mart, Texas, a town of under 2,000 people. He played football, he competed in rodeos, and from the age of 3, he was also doing commercials, which meant that by 10, the family was splitting time between Mart and Los Angeles. Jesse auditioning during part of the year and coming home to Texas for the rest. He picked up small guest spots on Walker, Texas Ranger, Grey's Anatomy, the kind of parts where you're doing your job well enough to keep getting hired without anyone thinking about you specifically when you're gone. That period matters not because of what he was doing, but because of what he was learning without realizing it. He grew up around people who communicated through action and silence, not expression. A town where nobody was putting on a show for anyone, and that self-possession ended up being more valuable than any formal training he ever received. His first real break came in 2006 when he was cast as Laundry Clark in Friday Night Lights. He was 18 years old. He'd played the character for 5 seasons and 65 episodes. Laundry was the loyal, slightly awkward best friend, the kind of character who exists everywhere in real life but rarely on television, because television usually needs its secondary characters to serve a function. Laundry just existed. He was a person and not a plot device, and Plemons played him with a warmth that felt completely unconstructed.
Just transitioning out of like child actor, going through the awkward phase as every teenager does, and kind of not really knowing where I would fit or what kind of parts I might be playing, and then became the token like troubled kid on all the procedural shows.
The show shot in a documentary style, loose and handheld. The directors encouraged the cast to find things in the moment rather than executing a pre-planned performance. Plemons has said that freedom was one of the most valuable things that happened to him in those years. It forced him to actually listen in a scene rather than waiting for his cue. It built the instinct he'd rely on for the rest of his career. Laundry also committed a serious crime midway through the series, and what Plemons did with that is the detail worth paying attention to. He didn't play the guilt as a separate layer dropped on top of the character. He let it live underneath. Laundry still made jokes. He was still loyal and still himself, but if you were watching closely, you could always feel the weight of something he was carrying that nobody else in the frame could see. That's the foundation, not a technique he learned, a way of being in a scene that 65 episodes gave him time to develop until it became instinct. And then Breaking Bad happened. He joined the show in season 5 as Todd Alquist. The writers, by his own account, refused to tell him anything about the character when he was cast. When he cornered them for information, they just looked at him, scared. Not of Jesse Plemons, of Todd.
Saying backstage, I was cornering every writer to try and get something out of it, and no one would say anything. But they would look at me as if I were Todd. So they were looking at me like, really scared. And I had no idea what.
Vince Gilligan eventually sat down with him and described Todd as essentially a raccoon. You run over a raccoon, you don't think about it, and you move on. That was the key. Todd was helpful, eager, and slightly awkward, the kind of person you don't think much about. He followed instructions, and he committed genuinely horrible acts with the emotional temperature of someone going about their Tuesday. In episode 5 of season 5, after a successful train heist, a kid on a dirt bike witnesses the crew celebrating and waves at them. Todd waves back, and then shoots him in the chest without hesitation. No panic, no visible decision, no aftermath playing on his face. Just a man who has already moved on before the moment has finished happening. That scene became one of the most discussed moments in the entire run of the show, and the reason it lands the way it does is entirely because of what Plemons doesn't give you. Any other actor might have played the internal conflict, or the horror at what just happened. Plemons plays the absence of all of it, the void where a human reaction should be. He took everything he'd built in Friday Night Lights, the warmth, the familiarity, the guy you trust, and turned it into a mask. The mask fits so well because it was genuine. Todd isn't performing normalcy. He just is normal by his own standards in a way that makes no sense to anyone watching. The performance changed how the industry saw him. Overnight, he went from good young actor to the specific person you call when you need a character who needs to feel like nobody and turn out to be the most dangerous thing in the room. After Breaking Bad, something shifted in how the industry saw him. He didn't become a movie star in the traditional sense. What happened instead is what the best directors in Hollywood started putting him in their films. Paul Thomas Anderson cast him in The Master in 2012, where he actually played a younger version of a Philip Hoffman character. Steven Spielberg cast him in Bridge of Spies and The Post, and suddenly every major filmmaker wanted him in their movies. That's the Alter years in short, not a star making movies, a craftsman that every serious filmmaker wanted access to. In 2024, Yorgos Lanthimos cast him in Kinds of Kindness, and this is where the conversation about Jesse Plemons stops being about potential and starts being about achievement. Lanthimos has said he'd been thinking about Plemons for years, that they talked about working together on a couple of projects where scheduling didn't align. When Kinds of Kindness finally came together, he was direct about his reasoning. I think he's just basically one of the greatest of his generation.
I always just kind of feel like I'm circling something, looking for the most exciting way in for me, so I don't feel like I'm working. So I feel like I'm just sort of following my curiosity and following some trail.
The film is an anthology, 3 separate stories, each starring Plemons alongside Emma Stone, William Dafoe, with each actor playing 3 completely different characters across the 3 segments. In the first, Plemons plays Robert, a man whose every action is dedicated by his controlling boss. In the second, Daniel, a cop convinced the wife who returned from being presumed lost at sea isn't actually his wife. In the third, a cult member hunting for someone with a specific and possibly supernatural gift. Lanthimos told him early on that he didn't want extreme physical transformations. He didn't want it to become an actor showcase. He wanted the differences found in behavior and not physicality, not in costumes and accents. Plemons has talked about how genuinely exciting he found that constraint. The harder the problem, the more interested he is. He won Best Actor at Cannes. He found out on his phone on the way home from a night shoot over the Atlantic. And then the same year, Lanthimos announced his next film would also star Plemons alongside Emma Stone. Begonia came out in 2025. Plemons plays Teddy Gatz, a beekeeper from rural Georgia who is completely convinced that the CEO of a pharmaceutical megacorporation is an alien, an Andromedan sent to Earth to destroy humanity. He and his intellectually disabled cousin Don kidnap her in their beekeeper suits and hold her in the basement of his farm until she confesses to being an alien invader and contacts her emperor.
How can you tell she's an alien?
The signs are obvious. Slight overbite, narrow feet, semi-protruding earlobes, high hair density, thin cuticles. You won't notice unless you know what you're looking for.
On paper, that's basically a comedy sketch, and the movie is genuinely funny in places, but Plemons plays Teddy completely straight from start to finish, and that commitment is the entire reason the film works. Because Teddy is not just a lunatic. His mother, Sandy, was left in a coma after a clinical trial connected to the pharmaceutical company Michelle runs. The madness isn't born from nowhere. It's born from grief and humiliation and the very specific feeling of watching a system destroy someone you love and having absolutely no legitimate way to make an answer for what it did. Teddy obviously can't sue a mega corporation and win. He can't make anyone powerful listen to him. So he builds a framework around his pain that gives it a target he can actually reach. He makes the CEO into an alien invader. He makes himself the hero of the only story where his anger makes sense. The intelligence in the performance is real. It's just completely misdirected. Teddy isn't stupid in any simple way. He has his theories, and he spent more time thinking about this than he spent thinking about anything. He's someone who has mistaken obsession for clarity, and who has no one around him willing or able to tell him the difference. The first thing you notice watching him is the contradiction between how insane his beliefs sound and how seriously he carries himself when he describes them. He speaks with total conviction. He believes he has figured out the hidden structure of reality, and Plemons plays that with no winking, no breathing, no breaking, no moment where the seam between himself and the character becomes visible. He lives in Teddy's reality completely, which means every insane thing Teddy says lands differently than it should.
We're going to give you the night to give your statement that you will give to your emperor and negotiate your species withdrawal from planet Earth.
Not as a punchline, but as a statement from a man who genuinely believes it. That commitment is what makes Teddy frightening underneath the comedy, because Teddy needs his cruelty to seem logical. He needs the kidnapping to be a mission and not a crime. If his behavior stops making sense from inside the story he's built, then he's not a soldier saving humanity. He's just a frightened man hunting another person. And then there's Don, Teddy's cousin, the person whose continued belief is the the thing keeping Teddy functional. Plemons plays the dynamic between them with a mix of genuine affection and quiet manipulation that reveals the full complexity of the character without ever announcing itself as a character choice. He cares about Dawn, the warmth is real, but the mission always comes first, and Dawn's purpose, whether Dawn understands it or not, is to keep following. There's something quietly devastating about watching how much Teddy depends on Dawn just by being there. He's not the strong one in this relationship. He's borrowing confidence from the fact that someone is still willing to follow him. The moment the people around him stop playing along, he has nothing left. And by the end of the film, Teddy is both ridiculous and tragic simultaneously. A man so desperate for the universe to make sense that he destroys his own humanity trying to prove he was right. That restraint is the whole craft, and it's what the Academy walked past. So what is the actual mechanism? What makes a Jesse Plemons performance land the way it lands? First, there's the restraint, and not the kind of restraint that announces itself as restraint. The kind that looks like nothing until you realize 20 minutes later that you've been reading his face the entire scene without being aware you were doing it. Most actors in an outsized role give you a signal at some point, or a moment where they let you know they understand how big this is. Plemons doesn't use it. He stays inside the character's reality completely, which means you have to do the work of holding both sides of the equation at once. That effort is what creates the impact. Second, there's the specificity of physical presence. He's talked about not being interested in extreme transformations. No radical weight changes for a role. The differences between his characters live in the behavior, the way a person holds the space around him. That discipline means there's nothing to hide behind. Every scene lives or dies on whether he's actually found the truth of the moment. Third, and this is the part people consistently underestimate, is the completeness of his commitment. Teddy is wrong about everything in Bugonia. Todd is wrong about everything that matters in Breaking Bad. Plemons never hedges on their behalf. He doesn't protect them by giving the audience a way out. He plays them as people who are entirely coherently themselves, regardless of how that reads from the outside. Put those three things together, and you get a performer who disappears so completely into a role that you stop watching an actor and start watching a person, and a person is always more interesting than a performance. The next time you watch something he's in, don't wait for him to do something. Just watch what the scene does around him. That's how he works, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. And if you did enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe, as I do upload weekly videos on this channel, and it would mean a lot